Remember that time you accidentally got in the middle of a family feud? You had no idea what was going on or who started it or what the background was? We're going to be talking about that today from Exodus chapter 17. Hey guys, and welcome back to God's Word Made Simple by Simple Servant Ministries. My name is Aaron Hawk, and if this is your first time visiting with us, I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today. God's Word Made Simple is an online discipleship ministry dedicated to taking God's Word and making it simple. We want to help you understand God's Word, apply it to your life, and grow in your relationship with the Lord. And by the way, if you appreciate this ministry and content, at some point make sure and hit that subscribe button, turn that bell notification to all so you don't miss any future videos. We would love to have you as part of our family. Okay guys, welcome back. So like I said in the intro, in Exodus chapter 17, we're going to see a significant battle that quite frankly just seems kind of out of place. It seems a little odd to be where it is. And I don't have time today to get into all the details of why this story is in here, but I do want to settle some of it. So really quick, the Amalek or Amalekites, as they are known, are descendants of Esau. So go check out Genesis chapter 25. Go check out Genesis chapter 25 if you want to know a little more of the background of Esau and Jacob and their rivalry with each other. I told you back then when we recorded those videos that the problems in the Middle East that still exist to this day started here, and actually they started even before that, but that's outside of the scope of today's video. Here's another example of that. So essentially Esau's grandson, if I have the genealogy correct, Esau's grandson is Amalek. So that's the Amalekites that we're reading about here. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily make sense to you yet, but essentially you had two people struggling over who had the birthright, who was the leader, the preeminent one, ultimately who was the one through whom the blessings of God would be revealed or would receive the blessings of God. That's ultimately what it was about. So verse 8 of chapter 17, and by the way, if you didn't catch last week's video, definitely at least catch chapter 17. You don't have to have that one to understand this section, but to understand the story, you need to go back at least that far. Anyway, let's start in chapter 17, verse 8. Then Amalek, so the grandson of Esau, Jacob and Esau, then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek." Okay, so the Amalek, of course, being representative in the same way that you refer to the nation of Israel as Israel, but actually Israel was Jacob. Again, go watch the Genesis video if that doesn't make sense to you. But Israel, his name was actually Jacob, and it was changed later to Israel. And now we refer to the nation of Israel simply as Israel. It's both a person and a nation. So Amalek, or the Amalekites, would be very much the same here. Anyway, so Moses said to Joshua, now this is the first time that we really see Joshua. I think this is the first occurrence of Joshua's name in the Bible. I wouldn't swear to that, but I'm pretty sure of it. You can let me know in the comments if you want. So Moses said to Joshua, and by the way, if you don't know this, Joshua is going to become a very key figure. In fact, he ends up being Moses' predecessor. So Moses is mentoring him. He is learning under Moses. Joshua eventually takes over leadership of the people of Israel. Okay, so Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek." Now, when you first read this, it might seem like, oh yeah, go find some good guys to fight. And generally, if we say that in America, now I don't know why you'd be saying that, but whatever. Maybe you're in karate because, martial arts instructor here, and that's, I don't know. But the context here is not go pick out the best. The context here is we're about to get attacked. See if you can scrounge up an army, Joshua. Remember, this is a nation of people that have been in slavery for years. So Joshua clearly had some military skills. I don't really know his background well enough to know how, where he got those skills, etc. But clearly he is the one leading and doing some training here. But he doesn't have an army. He has a group of people that used to be slaves, farmers and brickmakers. So he has to go find people that can do battle. So Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. Tomorrow, so they have advance notice that this is coming. Now, most likely that's through the use of scouts or something like that. In modern day, we still use scouts. So it's more than likely that they spotted a scout that was clearly from the Amalekites. And, there's any number of ways that you could slice this, right? Any number of ways you could see this. But I picture this, right or wrong, that doesn't tell us. But I'm assuming it was a scout. So they probably saw the scout following them, identify them, and then take off. And they're like, okay, battle's coming. They probably had some of their own scouts as well. Maybe they saw the Amalekite army, over a hill or something like that. The same stuff still happens to this day. So they have a little advance notice, so Moses immediately devises a plan. Now, ultimately, God is leading him. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So God does not explicitly command Moses to do this. Moses simply takes it upon himself, in this case in a good way, to use the rod, to use the staff of God as the symbol of God's authority and sovereignty, because that's the staff that God used to break Egypt. So it's clear that Moses had some levity in his leadership. We would say led by the Spirit. The Spirit came upon people in the Old Testament. He did not indwell people in the Old Testament, but I think the Spirit is probably involved in this at this point. I'm pretty confident of that theologically. I just can't prove it from the text. But anyway, whatever the case, Moses took the staff of God in his hand. So Joshua, as his eventual, if not already, I would say already because he's the first one that Moses calls, his second in command. Joshua, his second in command, did as Moses told him, and fought against Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Now, we're not entirely sure who Hur is. If you've ever seen the movie Ben-Hur, you may immediately picture that. That's possible. Some believe that this is that Hur, the one that was married to Miriam, but we're not 100% sure textually, because Hur was a fairly common name. So we're not 100% sure, but clearly this is someone of importance in the kingdom, one of the elders, no doubt. So they went up to the top of the hill. So it came about when Moses held his hand up, so the idea here being it would have been above the head, right, that Israel prevailed. Now notice there's a little symbolism there. We can't read too much into this, so please hear me carefully. This is the musings of my mind, but I think there's some symbolism there that when the hand is held up with the rod, it's symbolizing God's sovereignty and headship. It's just an idea. The text isn't explicit, so we can't be ironclad on that one. But I think it's at least an interesting observation. So it came about when Moses held his hand up, that Israel prevailed. And when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. Now, anybody that's holding their arm up, have you ever done like the milk jug challenge, or forget the milk jugs? Just hold your arms straight out for a while. Eventually they get tired, much less when you're holding something like milk jugs or a large staff, something like that. Having something heavy isn't a big deal if you're not doing it for long, but when you have something in your hands and you're lifting your arms up, your shoulder muscles aren't that big, and that's what actually allows you to lift those things in that manner anyway. So when he gets tired, when his arms go down, Amalek prevails. But Moses' hands were heavy. Then they took a stone and put it under him. In other words, he sat on, or it says it right here, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. Thus his hands were steady until the sunset. Now, I've read a few commentaries in the past, various ideas of how they did this. I'm coming from like a law enforcement and military self-defense type background. I imagine they just put his hands on their shoulders. Many of the commentaries that I've read on this in the past said that they like locked hands or something, but if you've ever locked arms to hold something, first off, you're not going to get it above your shoulder. Second, you're going to get tired. However, if you're just standing there, having someone's arm on your shoulder is actually pretty easy. You can do that as long as you can stand to stand. So I don't know exactly how they did it, but the bottom line is it says that Joshua and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. So I take this to mean that each of them owned one of Moses' hands or arms. So Joshua overwhelmed, interesting language there. Joshua is clearly the military leader. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Or I'm sorry, I misspoke a minute ago. I said Joshua and Hur. Aaron and Hur supported his hands. So sorry about that. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. So I find that interesting language because who's getting credit here? I mean, Moses lifted the staff, Joshua's the one fighting, but who is ultimately getting credit? God in his sovereignty. But the amazing thing is, for stuff like this, people are still attributed with winning, right? It was clear that it was God's sovereignty because of using the staff in that way. And it wasn't that the staff was magical, it's that it represented God's governance, God's sovereignty over his people. I just find that interesting, though. I think Moses is probably trying to build up his young protege. All right, anyway. Then the Lord, verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, write this in a book as a memorial and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Moses built an altar and named it, the Lord is my banner. And he said, the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation. Now, again, I don't have time in this video to get into all the theories, and I don't have a single theory that just makes complete sense to me why this story is here, other than we are preparing to get into a covenant with the Lord. That's where the story is heading. So we're going to have another kind of daily in the life story, and then we've got the covenant where ultimately the Ten Commandments are delivered coming. So that's kind of where we are. I think this is just showing once again God's protection and his sovereignty over his people. The people complain about water. They have water provided. Even though they were doing it in a sinful way, God still provided for them. And then they have a battle where somebody comes out against them and the Lord delivers them in a miraculous way. And then we go into the other story that we're going to get into next week. So, that said, make sure that you are subscribed. And if you liked this video and content, hit like, but hit subscribe, turn that bell notification to all so you don't miss any future videos, including the ones that are coming up that I just told you about. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thank you very much, and God bless.